Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
Hey, Connected Life friends, it's Justin here, and this will be the only time you're going to hear from me this entire episode, so listen up. It's going to be an incredible episode. I got out of the episode entirely and handed it over to Abby because of the nature of who's inside of it. There's some extended spiritual family of Abby's that profoundly impacted her life journey, and they join her and their biological daughter to talk about the repair process within relationships and family structures. And honestly, even editing the podcast, I found myself in tears with beauty as I was feeling like the beauty of the exchange inside of it. So you're going to love this. It's going to be a 2-part podcast. And with that said, on top of that, just to let you guys know, right now, we're in the process of taking applications for our life consulting masterclass. We already have spent our first year with that, and we've had incredible breakthroughs for people. For those of you who don't know what it is a year-long 40-week course, 40 weeks over the course of 1 year. And we are teaching people the foundations of our life consulting tools to empower and equip others to go out and fully do what we do. And for those of you who have ever considered maybe a job in this field, this is going to be an incredible deep dive, not only into practical, logical tools, but also into heart processes for yourself. What we require out of every one of our life consultants is that they go on a very deep journey in their own souls so that they can actually walk a process out with other people. And we have people that have joined the course who honestly have said, hey, I came here for personal transformation. And if I start a business out of it, that's cool. And so even if you haven't decided that you want to be a life consultant, it may be something for you, but there is an application process. It is a very select few who are going to be allowed inside of the program. And that's just because we want high quality of impact for every individual that's inside of the course. If you want to know more about it, there's going to be applications open until August 1st, I think, maybe mid-August, but you can email us at lfa@stumballconsulting.com to get more information. We'll send you a link to everything that you need to know about it, and you can see if that's actually something that you want to do. So without further ado, here's an incredible episode. Have your way with it.
All right, you guys. I am so freaking excited about this podcast. And my excitement has built because it has taken hours and hours of technological difficulties to get it to actually be successful. And we are just fingers crossing that it will work today. But it is some of my most favorite humans on the planet who have never been on our podcast. It feels like the biggest treat that I get to spend an hour talking with them about their lives. So I want you guys to welcome Pietze.
Hi, everyone.
But today we have more than just Pietze is her parents. We have the people.
My parents, the people who started it all. the people who did it and brought me into this world. They're sitting right here with me. My dad's dying 1,000 deaths right now.
We're triggered.
They're both triggered. They both.
What's our safe word?
Oh my God. Oh Lord.
So this is Doug and Janice. They're Pietze's parents. They have been like parents to me. Oh my gosh. I can't even. Every Father's Day, every Mother's Day, I always reach out to them because they have been such a huge gift. I met Pietze when I was 7, which means I met her parents then, and I would go over to her house. And when I met Pietze, there were 4 of the children there, and then Janice continued to bring beautiful humans into the world. So now there's 6 of them.
Yeah.
So I grew up as an only child. It was like Disneyland going over to their house. It was so much fun and so much life and energy and noise and chaos. And I was actually talking to somebody the other day who was telling me about how he grew up with a lot of chaos in his life. And he used to go to this one friend's house, and he was like, it felt so safe being at that friend's house that even doing things just like cleaning with their family made him feel like normalcy and like he belonged and connected. And he was laughing about how just cleaning the house with his friend and his friend's parents was healing for him. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's so true. I remember being at Doug and Janice's house as a little kid, and it'd be like the day where we'd all clean and everybody had a job and we'd all grab dookies. Is that what they are called?
Yes.
But
Good
Dookie-
job,
You have
Abby.
to explain it.
Yeah, you have to explain it. By dookies, we're not grabbing each other's poops. Or our own, for that matter. It is a Frisian word for washcloth. Okay.
Yeah, for small cloth.
Yeah. Janice is Dutch. And so we would all grab our rags. We'd all work at cleaning at the same time. And it was just, there's so many normal experiences that I learned and grew in that I wasn't able to get from some of the things happening in my family. And then I honestly just want to tell people that anyone who's ever been thankful for the podcast or things that me and Justin have done really owe Doug and Janice the biggest thanks, because I don't think I would be on the planet if it wasn't for them. They are the type of people that when I was a teenager would make me breakfast every day and sit for hours like counseling
Chocolate
me.
chip pancakes.
Yes, chocolate chip pancakes. And they would talk to me about everything going on in my life. I cried more they were like live-in counselors. They just loved me and they were interested in my world. And I remember processing everything with it. It was like, I mean, I just wish every human on the planet could have a safe family that they got to grow up in, because it stabilized so much in my life. It taught me what love was. And honestly, it set me up for the rest of my life. Doug and Janice so chose me and delighted in me and loved having me around and invited me to do life with them in such a dramatic way that after that, it was almost like just a belief I had that people would want me around. And that so impacted everything I've done since then. Is I was able to come from love, a place of coming from love. And so I'm just overwhelmed. I couldn't say enough words. I wish I could give like a 20-minute version of how story after story after story. I remember in like my college years, I could walk into the church and Doug could be in the middle of like 5 million things, and I could be just having a hard day, and he would stop everything and just like hug me, and I would just cry on his shoulder. And Janice talking
You
through.
definitely ruined a lot of his shirts. That's for sure. There's a lot of mascara stains.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say that. And I think while we're on the topic of you feeling safe, I think we should just go around the room and everyone say your first thoughts that come to your head of Abby when we first met her. What did you think? What did you think? What did you think about our little Abby with her perm, her eye patch, and her leg braces? Of course we had to take you in. We didn't know what was going to happen to you. What other choice did we have? And then you just stuck around.
That's funny, Beast. That's funny. Okay. Well,
I love you.
anyway, they are wonderful and delightful human beings. So I'm so glad that you guys are here today. I just want to honor you and just encourage every family out there. When you have kids and you love on their friends, you have no idea how much lasting impact it can have.
Yeah.
And the little things that you do just when your kids' friends are over there can leave lasting impressions of love for them. So today, Pietze, what are we doing?
We're talking about all the things with my parents. We're taken a deep dive into childhood. I felt like, I've processed enough about my childhood without my parents on the podcast that I figured that we should probably let them have a voice. I'm like, they might have an opinion about some of these things. So we thought, let's bring them on. Let's talk about things. But honestly, in all reality, I mean, we're going to kind of, I think, and I'll share this as we talk, but really the last, 6 years of my life has been really going after healing pain on a deeper level. And part of that included healing my pain with you guys, and I think why we're sharing it now is because the tools that we use in Pathway, before it was Pathway to Freedom, really were some of the fundamental tools that helped us find our way back to healing with each other. And so, yeah, I'm excited to dive in. We all have tissues. Hopefully we won't. Mom's already been crying. We didn't even make it past the intro. She was crying. So hopefully we're not like a blubbering mess here, but I think let's just dive right in, shall we?
Yeah.
Sure.
Maybe I'd just rather go back to Abby saying how great our house was.
Oh, yeah.
Because it may not be so good from now,
Yeah. We'll just skip that. We'll skip all the messy bits.
I
Right?
can just reiterate that at the end of the podcast. So that's what people remember.
Well, the funny thing is even like during some of my hardest years where Abby is like in our family, where Abby is most healing years in our family. Which is such an interesting dichotomy between the two of us.
It was hysterical. I was just trying to kick Pietze out of the family. It's really what I was trying to do.
Right.
I mean, at that point, I kind of gladly let you take my place. I was like, fine, you deal with them. I'm good. I'm out. You guys have a new daughter. The replacement's here. The good one. We got the good daughter here.
It was really funny because Pietze would be like, great, I'm glad they spent time with you. Now they won't need time with me.
Right.
Totally.
Obviously, very dysfunctional for Pietze.
Well, I could say, though, that, Pietze talking about having to come to talk to us about different issues that were difficult for her. It was hard at first for us because you do just want to look at the years that you raised your kids as being amazing and wonderful and that you gave your best. I remember when I had Pietze. Shoot, here comes the tears.
Bring it on, Mom.
But I remember holding her and thinking, I just want to do the best. I never want to make a mistake because I love her so much.
Oh.
Yeah.
So, then you fast forward 20 years, 25 years, and you get an earful of all the things you did wrong. And you actually just... Sorry, Pietze.
Oh, no, it's great. I love it. Let's do this.
But it's true. And you want to kind of shut down and pretend that, no, that's not it. That's not right.
Mm-hmm.
But you realize as a parent that if you ignore what your child is saying, that you block them from freedom.
Yeah.
You block them from becoming all that God has intended for them to be.
Yeah.
And so you need to, put your big boy pants on and you need to own up and you need to go, okay, I am going to lean in. I am going to have these difficult conversations, but first you just want to run.
Yeah.
You don't want to do it. You don't want to believe that that's true.
That's
Yeah.
so true.
I think
that
I've become a... Go ahead,
I think that
the two daughters are competing. Who's going to talk? Who's going to get in here? Go ahead, Abs. You take it.
we joke, but we actually have never had competition ever.
We joke about this all the time, but no, we've never had it.
I think it's so true. I think every parent, and I mean, because there's also the fact of when you're a parent, there are 5,000 sacrifices that you gave that your kids never understood or never fully can comprehend. And so when you feel like you gave every ounce of you and then they have pain, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do that. So Pietze, why don't we start with you even realizing that you had pain from your childhood? Because for a long time, I don't know that existed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I It's funny because we have had Johnny on here a lot talking about him dissociating. And in a lot of ways, I don't dissociate, but then there are huge portions of my life that I have dissociated from, where somebody will tell me even a story and I'm like, I have no recollection of that. And so I think that my childhood for a long time was, and by childhood, I mean more teenagehood. And it's not that it doesn't come back to things when I was younger, because but I think a lot of our hardship came when I was a teenager. And I mean, I think for me, and we always laugh about this because I'm like, yeah, I was my parents' nightmare child. I was the nightmare child growing up. I was the nightmare child from the moment I came into the world. It just kind of shifted. I mean, really, but my parents have stories of me like what? Like,
oh, yeah, stories.
Reversing our car into the busiest intersection.
No,
in
we
LA.
were driving on a freeway, moving to Colorado, and a moving truck was in front of us with Doug driving.
Yeah, on I-70.
And Pietze got out of her car seat, and I'm yelling at her to stop getting out of her car seat, but she's not listening to me. And she goes in between the seats and she hits the gear shift.
Oh my gosh.
And it goes from 75 in the fast lane to park.
Oh my God.
And the whole car shuts down. So dangerous. And all I could do was pull over, thankfully, without hurting anything to the side. The moving truck is going forward. We don't have cell phones at that time.
There are no cell phones at all.
So all I'm thinking is, I hope Doug can see that I pulled over to the side. And,
Well,
luckily we made it.
I'm sure. I got punished by having to ride with Dad, which I thought was awesome.
Yes.
I was like, this is the best punishment ever.
Janice was like,
I was the parent who gave them gray hairs. Not only that car story, I reversed the car into the busiest intersection in LA.
Oh, that's right. She got out of her car seat when,
Yeah.
Not like being restrained.
No.
I've never liked being restrained.
No, she would sneak out while she was taking a nap to the next door neighbor's house. And while she was going to the next door neighbor's house, proceed to take off all of her clothes because she wanted to go see where her big brother was playing with the neighbor.
I mean, just real quick, one time we had a next door neighbor who was this amazing theologian and Bible professor from the school we had gone to. And he and I were in this deep conversation. And all of a sudden, he wasn't looking at me anymore. And he pointed over my shoulder and he goes, "Does she belong to you?" And I turned around. All I saw was Pietze's naked butt cheeks running down the street. I said, I got to go.
I mean, it's kind of amazing I didn't turn into a stripper because it was like in my blood. I feel like I think
it was.
Yeah. Anywho, I went from giving
Pietze
my parents.
Also, while we're telling bad Pietze stories, didn't she smear her poop all over the walls?
We were going to leave that one out.
Oh, man. Yes. No. I was doing daycare, and Pietze, while I was inside nursing one of our babies, Pietze was outside gathering all of the kids I was babysitting to her dirty diaper as they proceeded to paint all the outdoor toys. And I believe it was about 99 degrees in California that day.
Gosh.
And then I ran out because I thought something's not right. They're all too quiet looking at these toys. I ran out. I saw what was happening. I put them into the bathroom and I said, "Don't touch anything," to give them all baths. And I ran back outside to start washing the toys in this heat. And when I came back in the bathroom, she had found the Pond's cold cream. And now they were smearing that all over the bathroom. It was just endless.
Okay,
she was a leader from the beginning.
Art. I was a leader and I was an artist. Okay, and you can't put restrictions on this kind of gift. I mean, yeah, I colored in my dad's prized library, ripped out all the pages, cut my hair, cut my brother's hair. The stories go on, really, for days. But let's just say if you're a parent out there and you have a child who you are at the end of your rope
they
with,
might turn out awesome.
There might be some hope.
Yeah.
Right.
There might be some hope out there.
Yes.
They will be the most creative.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I went from, in the beginning, giving my parents gray hairs over apparently almost killing myself, stripping as a child, getting other kids into messes, to giving them a lot of gray hairs as a teenager. But I mean, the funny thing is like, when I look back at childhood, I'm like, I actually loved our childhood. I felt like, you know, you guys did such a good job of making our childhood magical. We had no money. Like, I come to find out now that you guys were literally like burning furniture in a fireplace for us to keep warm in the middle of the winter. And yet, like, you know, I look back on our Christmases and I'm like, we had the most magical Christmases. We got to go on vacations because mom would get up and work paper routes and dad would work you know, like, you guys sacrificed so much for us growing up. And, you know, we were our own little kid gang, you know. We had so much fun, and then we wrangled Abby into that too. You know, we had so much fun growing up doing things. But I think, you know, one of the things that I realized as I kind of started to process my pain was just, you know, realizing that as I became a teenager, one, I think we know that I'm incredibly headstrong and very, you know, headstrong. We'll just say that. Very headstrong, very stubborn at times. And I think coming into being a teenager, and also I think I've talked about the prophetic before on the podcast, you know, but even understanding that I'm prophetic and I can feel atmospheres, I can feel things around me. I can feel things, but I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what to do with that. And I've realized sometimes now that prophetic gifting will almost create a frustration inside of me. But I had no coping skills to know what to do with that. And I think when I became a teenager, you know, we went into one of the most stressful seasons of our lives as a family. And, you know, you guys were pastoring a church. My parents, if you don't know, planted churches our whole life and have been pastoring. And I will say, I feel like one of the things you guys did so well was, and I talk about this all the time, was you guys helped me cultivate a relationship with God. And you guys weren't controlling about it. You guys trusted me to hear God's voice. Like, you know, I tell the story all the time about, like, you know, I went and bought my first secular CD, like a CD that wasn't Christian, and it had cuss words in it. And I was 13. And, you know, we weren't allowed to cuss. We didn't watch movies with cussing. Although now I've realized that we did, but you guys probably like somehow drowned it out. But, you know, I realized, like, during that time, Dad was like, hey, I'm not going to tell you what you can and can't listen to. That's something you got to pray about, and you got to protect your heart. And so I felt really empowered in my relationship with God from a young age. But I think coming into being a teenager and feeling the stress of our house, like, and you guys being in such a difficult season, like, that was such a hard season for us. And I really struggled. And I know you guys really struggled with me. What was that season like for you guys?
Wait, let me just interrupt really quick. So what we're going to do in today's podcast is Pietze has gone on the journey with her parents of working through triggers. That, like she said, this is everything that we teach in the Pathway to Freedom course. She actually lived out, and it has dramatically changed her relationship with her parents. And so we wanted to have an episode where they could kind of talk through what happened in their relationship dynamics, and then be able to hear how they learned to communicate and meet each other through it. And so even their ability to talk about what happened back and forth with ownership and grace for each other is from hours and hours of having hard conversations that have brought a lot of, I think, healing and clarity. So go ahead and share about what your guys' lives were like when Pietze was a teenager. What was going on for you guys?
Well, we had bought a bakery business. And the reason is because we needed to make money because of planting churches. And so with that, Jan and I were working staggered 6-day-a-week shifts. So her day off was on Saturday and my day off was Sunday. And in addition to that, the church we were planning met on Friday nights. So at that time, I was training up worship leaders for the most part, but it was back and forth. So I'd have to lead worship and then I'd speak. And then on Sundays, to make money and help out friends, I led worship and took one of the kids with me to lead worship in another church. So basically, I broke every single law of Sabbath. I mean, not that we're into law or anything, but there's a reason Sabbath is important.
Yeah.
So it's not an excuse. It's just to say we had no margins.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening, at least the thing that Pietze confronted me about, was with no margins, I had a hair trigger anger issue. And, it wasn't like there were, beatings and things like that, but I was always ticked off, and it didn't take much to put me there. Like I said, there was no white space.
Yeah.
And, some of the worst things that I regret being a parent happened during that season of just losing control. I mean, we were homeschooling the kids in addition to Jan working 6 days a week.
You guys both worked. You were homeschooling and you had young kids and you were
you had
just
a church.
doing the
And
best.
doing our church.
We were, I would
And-
deliver 6 days a week, and then I'd go in to do some church stuff, and it was insane. It really was bad, and it cost me physically, and something that the Lord had to heal later on. But I'll never forget the day she came in, and I think you were visiting us, Abby, in Sterling. And Pietze came in and she said, "Dad, I need to talk to you." And I was in my office, and it takes me a little bit to reset, but I could kind of tell, oh boy, this is important. And it really was a come to Jesus moment for me, because a lot of things had happened in the meantime, but she had to unload what my being who I was during that time and how I was acting. She had to say it. And I remember crying a bit. I remember just feeling a real compassion for her, but feeling terrible too at the same time, because again, what Jan said, it's so true. I mean, when Petey was born, poor Janny had bronchitis and couldn't hold her. And so for the first 2 hours, 3 hours of her life, I just held her. And I remember just feeling such love. And I didn't think my heart could get that big, So to do things that actually hurt her, it's, you talk about being ashamed of it. It's not like shame, like I can't go to God or whatnot. It's just a profound disappointment in yourself that you could hurt somebody that you love so much. Yeah. And I remember it was through the grace of Jesus. I mean, and I don't mean that lightly, that I just shut up when she talked and just tried to nod my head a lot.
You did a good job.
Tell her that, I understood, all the pain and the stuff she went through. And I think that was the beginning, at least for she and I.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was the beginning. And I would say
that
that
particular
was probably,
come to Jesus moment.
Yeah, that was probably about like 13 years ago.
Wow.
Which is crazy.
Time goes quick
to think. But yeah, I mean, I think it's been an interesting journey, because I think in some ways, like, I look back and I'm like, yeah, I dissociated. Thanks for saying all that, by the way, Dad. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
But there was so much that I dissociated from. But then also, I knew, like, I had such hardened walls up towards you guys. And I mean, that's like what you guys felt when I was a teenager. Is like my response was just, my triggered response was just to like put my walls up and shut down as a person, because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to. And I think one thing that I've realized is, like, I am such a deep empath. Like, I feel very deeply for people. It's what makes me great at my job, and also is the worst. But, and I feel really deeply for the people that I love and care about. And I think for me in that season, even, like, there was a frustration of not just at you guys, but for you guys, for you guys with the church, for you guys with our life. That as a kid, like, you're watching, like, your parents give everything, and they're exhausted, and we're getting kind of the pieces left of you. But there was which was so hard. I think it was so hard for me during that season. And at the same time, I'm like, as a parent now, I'm like, I know exactly what that feels like. I know exactly what it feels like to love these people that I made so much. And yet, like, I've been in seasons where I can't help it, but I'm at the end of my margin and they're getting the worst of me. They're getting my table scraps. Yeah. And I know what it does. I know the child psychology. Yeah. Like, I have all the information and yet I still can't change it. Mm-hmm. I'm trying. I'm doing everything that I can. I'm doing the best that I can. And I think part of me coming out of childhood, I blamed myself a lot for our relationship. Like, at first I thought, man, like, I was such a horrible person. I was such a horrible kid. And I don't know if you remember this, Dad, but like, I called you after I moved out when I was 18, like the day I turned 18, I moved out. Like, we had a fractured relationship. I was totally shut down and I was like ready to just get out of the house and live my life, And I remember after calling you and being like, Dad, I'm so sorry. I hope I called you too, Mom, but I don't remember. Probably didn't. But, I was like, I'm so sorry because I really did feel so bad. Yeah. Like, I actually had a lot of shame and I felt really bad. But I think as I started getting emotionally healthy and learning how to have compassion on myself, and not just feel shame, like, but learning why I would do some of the things that I would do, and being able to like understand those things with compassion and being like, oh, you were a kid who felt really overwhelmed and you didn't know what to do. Yeah. And I wish I was the type of kid who could have said, I am not doing good and I'm soft and I need help. But I wasn't. I was the kid who got hard and acted out and was mean and aggressive towards the people around me. But that behavior wasn't just, oh, Pietze's a bad person. It was, oh, I was deep, deep, deep down underneath all of that. I was a scared little girl who deeply wanted security and love and to know that my parents were okay and to know that we were going to make it and to know that everything was going to be okay and that love was present. And I didn't know how to reach out and ask for reassurance. Yeah. Yeah. So it came out through attack and I think that going on the journey of me getting healthy was like a huge turning point for me in me understanding why I showed up. And that was kind of the first thing is that then I began to understand, oh my gosh, it was this and this. But I didn't know at that point how to have healthy conversations that were not accusatory. Because then I'm feeling all the pain. Yeah. I'm feeling all the pain of this and you want somebody to blame and you want something, because you're like, why would I feel all this pain? Or why, if you guys loved me, why didn't I feel that way? And I mean, like one of the things that we talked about, which this came later.
I wish you all could just see this because everybody's crying. It's just one for all the podcast listeners out there. Everyone is just crying, and I love it. It's the most tender, love nuggety thing. Most people are going to be impacted just by hearing you guys be so tender towards each other because it's so unusual. It's beautiful. Go ahead, Pete.
I mean, we've done a lot of work. I'm proud of all of us.
Yes, we have.
We've done a lot of work, and it's been worth it, but it's been hard. Yeah. But one of the things, the revelations that we had in the last few years, Mom, was, even just, my memories of you as a mom when I was a little girl was like the most loving, compassionate, like so safe. You were like the safest mom. Yeah. Just like, I have such tender, and your mom was a lot like that. Like, I have so many memories of her, like being so loving and so compassionate towards me, and you emanated that. And then as I got to be a teenager, I'm starting to get hormones. You guys are going into the hardest season. I'm shutting down. And simultaneously during that time, which I dissociated from this until Mom brought it up a couple of years ago, but like, you stopped touching me. And
touch is like your love language.
It is one of my
Yes.
biggest love languages is physical touch.
Yeah.
And I didn't even realize that until you brought it up. Go ahead, Mom. If you can. And I mean, I'll just kind of take over for a minute, and then when you're ready, you can. But the sad thing is that the way that you realize that is that it was your own sexual abuse from when you were a kid. That as I started, when we went through puberty, that was probably triggering some of the sexual abuse that happened for you as a kid. And we had no idea.
No, I think it took me a while, actually, just only a few years ago, that I was able to look at myself and go, why is it hard for me to hug anybody that's, teenagers and up?
Mm.
And I thought, because if kids are around, I'm the first to hug.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the first to hold.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the first to express love to. And the Lord just really reminded me that my sexual abuse.
Yeah.
And I think if we're talking about triggers, I think anybody during that age and older of my sexual abuse, I couldn't touch.
Mm.
Yeah.
I had a really hard time. It's like I would go to do it because it came naturally, and then I'd stop myself.
Mm.
So simultaneously, we're going through all of this. And like Pietze said, at that time, then I stopped just automatically hugging her, loving her, telling her how wonderful she was.
Mm.
And I didn't even realize I was doing that.
Yeah.
It wasn't until later I put two and two together and I said to you, honey, I've realized this about myself. And I think that it's impacted our relationship.
Mm.
Yeah. And I really loved that you brought that up to me because I forgot about that. And then when you brought that up, it was kind of like a missing puzzle piece for me because I realized through like therapy and a lot of the work that I did is how much I equated you stopping touching me with me not being lovable.
Wow.
Mm.
Wow.
And how and it was a very subconscious thing,
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think, when you stop getting that and then simultaneously life is getting hard, our interactions are
Absolutely.
getting hard. There's not that place of reprieve where
Right.
it's like, hey, you're safe. I love you. So I think having that taken away during that season was so hard, but then of course, as an adult, I'm like, man, I have so much compassion for you in that because I think, man, that would be so hard.
But don't you think that's why it's so important that we do communicate?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because it's really through our communication and allowing myself to look back that I discovered this about myself. And it wasn't just you, it was with all my kids.
Mm.
But I realized that, wow, this is happening. And that by us communicating, I could share that with you.
100%.
And I could really let you know it wasn't you, but I understand how you would feel like it was you, how suddenly you felt so unlovable because, also not just physical touch, but because your dad and I were so busy, emotionally, we were not there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were not as present because we were just dog paddling to survive.
Yeah, totally. And I think I'm so thankful that you brought that up to me because I think on a subconscious level, I would have always believed
Yes,
that there was a part of me
Absolutely.
that wasn't worthy of love.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Now, I think I could have done the work to heal that at some point, but having you, I'm like, oh, that freed me. And that's why these conversations are important. And parents ask me all the time, like, why, or people are like, why do we need to bring up the past? The past isn't the past. And I'm like, yeah, except for the problem is that past that's in the past is not in the past. It's affecting your relationships all around you right now.
Yeah.
Your past
And
is
a way
affecting the past affects your subconscious on such a crazy level, and your subconscious is how you make 90% of your decisions.
Yeah.
So it's a very crazy thing.
Powerful.
Yes, it's very powerful, and it's really important, and it's why we find ourselves in cycles over and over again, or making decisions we don't want to do, because our subconscious often is directing our path without us being aware of it. So having conversations like Janice going into like God helping her get back to her subconscious about what was going on in her with hugging her kids, then allowed Pietze to get back into her subconscious, make the subconscious things conscious. And the more we become conscious of things, the more we can then choose what to do with them. We can heal whatever we're aware of. Whatever we dissociate from is just going to continue to impact us. So I think that's like a really beautiful gift that you've given in choosing to be honest and vulnerable. Pete,
but
oh, go ahead, Janice.
I was just going to say, just real quick, I was on the camp of that's the past, let it go. And Pietze was really the one that pushed. Mm-hmm. And many times I fought that because I'm like, listen, I'm sorry. Let's just move on. Yep. But she really needed to dig deep. And I think that's what makes her such a great life coach. And it pushed me, but it was a good push because I needed to be pushed to say, okay, yeah, you're right. We need to go back and we need to examine this stuff. I need to examine this stuff. But it wasn't easy for me.
Well, and I will say this. I want to say one thing just about the physical touch thing. I'm so glad that you were able to have that conversation with me, just because I think it's not about you guys being bad. It's not about you being wrong, but it's about you guys getting to share with me what your heart would have been.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
This is what happened because of my humanity and because of my brokenness that even you were a victim to, Mom. That wasn't your fault, and it's affected your life in such a big way. And that's so sad. But even you being able to come back and say, but this is what my heart would have been towards you.
Right.
Like, this is what I would have wanted for you.
Right.
Then that heals that part inside of me where I go, oh, because it's not about the fact that it happened. It's about the fact of like understanding each other's hearts and you being able to have a voice and say, no, that was not you.
Yes.
That was not you. It was not your fault. That was my own stuff. Like, rather than me putting that against you.
Right.
Like, my mom never touched me. I would have never put the pieces together of why that happened. I would have always thought it was my fault.
Right.
And
it is beautiful what you said, to accept each other's humanity. I think if we can, then we can come without accusatory language, without blame.
Yeah.
And we could just be open to hearing what each other is feeling and what we've gone through.
We can own our stuff.
Yeah.
That's so important. You got to own what you do,
Well, and the truth is that for a lot of years, we didn't have good conversations.
Right.
Yeah. Would you start with how you started the conversations, Pete, and then how that went the first round?
Yeah. And we're kind of like, obviously for people listening, we're kind of jumping all over the place and hopefully people are tracking. But, initially I had that conversation with my dad. And I think it kind of stemmed from a conversation that you and I had, Abby, and you're like, you need to have a voice. And I was like, I don't want to have a voice. But, I'm like, okay, I'll do it and I'll be brave. And I was so thankful.
Oh, you were terrified of having that conversation. I
was terrified of any kind of vulnerability with my parents at all.
Yep.
And let's just be honest. This was during the very beginning of my marriage, which if you go back and listen to Johnny and I's marriage story, you'll understand the trauma I was in during this season. So all my pain is getting triggered.
Yep.
But, I think once, I was talking about how all of a sudden you feel all the pain of everything. And, at first it was like I blamed myself. Then I could have compassion and understanding for myself. But then you realize the pain of it because you're aware of the pain and you want someone to blame or you want people to see what they did to you. And even though I wasn't trying it, even though I technically, I'm using air quotations, technically had the right. Abby and I laugh about this all the time when we think about our 15 years ago, us coming into emotional health and what it looked like, because we're like, oh, we thought like we used all the right language. I
Yep.
used all the right language, but it
Mhm.
still had blame. It's still because I hadn't healed the stuff underneath. So even though I was trying to use emotional health language and I was trying to have these powerful conversations, my triggers were flying everywhere. I
Mhm.
came in a spirit of blame and accusation. And I can't imagine as a parent how painful that would have been to be on the other side of it when the thing that I have pain about was also probably one of your guys' most painful seasons where you were doing everything you could
Mhm.
to make sure that I was okay. I mean, wouldn't you say,
Yes.
Mom?
Yes.
Like that
Sorry.
probably was really hard for you
Yes.
having those conversations
Yes.
early on.
Yes. Really hard.
Yeah.
I-
And they
I thi-
didn't end well. I mean,
No.
like they ended basically in more fracture in our relationship, more like we got through it, but it was not,
Right.
it didn't bring connection and closeness.
I think
and
it
seeing
sometimes
each other.
caused damage.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it is good to say that so people
Yeah.
can know that we started on this journey, but it wasn't like every talk was amazing and set us free and we didn't walk away with triggers or anything like that. Like sometimes it caused real damage to both of us,
Yeah. It was really painful.
But the issue is that that's what's great about a family is that you're a family and you keep at it. Like,
Mhm.
one thing I had to keep asking myself, do I want to be right or do I want relationship?
Mm.
And if I want relationship, I humble myself
Mhm.
and I go back again
Mm.
Yeah.
and I pick up every place that's hurt and said, all right, let's try this again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something, Dad?
Well, it was strange from my point because you guys would talk and, I'd be here with Mom and I would see what would happen to her as a result of these conversations. And it was just hard being a dad because, I adore you, Pietze.
Yeah.
And of course I'm, crazy in love with your mom and to this day. And to watch you guys not be able to tune
Yeah.
it in and get it, where you could have a relationship. And so I'd support Mom, but my prayer, when I go by myself, it's just, oh God, let this thing work out, because sometimes the tension before you get reconciliation is some of the hardest place to live in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine like being a father and a husband in that situation and feeling torn between two women that you love a lot.
And I think he knew that both our hearts were that we loved each other,
Right.
But
Yeah.
we just couldn't get there.
but we couldn't get there. We couldn't connect.
There was too much pain between
Too
us.
much.
There was way too much pain. And during this time, I'm away in Wisconsin. I'm going through a really hard time, and I think during that season, we kind of, if you know my story again, you can go back and listen, but I think towards the end of the band,
When she says that her husband was in a band.
he was in a touring band,
Yeah.
and I kind of came to a breaking point in my life. We had our daughter. It was really difficult. And I think my way of coping was always, and I think I learned this during my teenage season, was like, I'm fine. I'll handle it by myself.
Yeah.
Like, I can take care of myself. I can rely on myself. So I didn't open up to people. I didn't even tell Abby, who I tell everything. I didn't tell her about everything I was going through. I didn't tell any of you guys.
No.
She just locked it down.
Yeah. I just locked it down.
Yeah, I kind of found out listening to a podcast and almost drove off the side of the road. In
He didn't know all the nitty gritty details. He obviously, by that point, I know more.
So,
But I think,
oh, go ahead, Beats.
I know, Mom, you said like later, like, oh, I could tell you weren't doing okay. I could feel it. I could feel that you weren't doing okay. But out of that season, what ended up happening is that I knew we ended up moving back home. And moving back home for me was always something that I wanted because I wanted to be close to my family. And then always something that I dreaded because I didn't want to be close to my family.
Sure.
And because honestly, like I felt like I could enjoy my family and then have distance. And it's the way that we figured out how to operate, right?
Right.
Like if we could have distance, then we could have a relationship that worked
Right.
for the most part, right? Like if I held you at arm's length, if we had physical, emotional, spiritual distance, then it was okay. And I mean, I don't know if you guys know this. I think you do, but you know, like part of the big reason that God told me that I was moving back home was to heal my relationship with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like he said, like, you have a lot of skeletons in your closet and I love you too much not to clean them out.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I didn't want to, but I knew he was right. I knew that it was the next challenge that I had in my life to healing. And I think, you know, Abby and I talk about this all the time. It's like when you felt so broken in your life, like you get to a point where you're just like, I just want to be whole. I want to be okay. And I'm willing to do the hard thing because staying like this, I can't do this, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think moving, you know, back here, now I have 2 kids at this point. You know, I'm had a lot of life under my belt. I think becoming a parent was really helpful for me in understanding you guys, because when you understand how difficult it is to be a parent, how many times you are pushed to your limit, how hard it is to choose compassion and choose love and choose safety for your kids, emotionally speaking, that is so hard. And, you know, there are so many ways when I look back in my childhood that you guys did that so well, despite really hard circumstances, especially when we were younger, you know? And so I think all of that helped a lot. And then I think, all of that helped a lot. But when I came here, it was definitely Trigger City for me on the inside.
Well,
and that
also what you
coming
should
out.
mention is when you guys moved back home, you moved in with your parents.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Yep. Yeah.
Because
That was
Trigger
real fun.
City
How
is
was that for you,
literally-
Mom? Me, Johnny, and our 2 kids.
Yes.
And your guys. I mean,
Ew.
like, it's not a small house, but it's not big. Like,
Well,
it's
we
not
already
big.
have her youngest brother living with us too, so
Yep.
it was all that.
Yep. It was a lot of triggers for us too.
Yeah.
Because we hadn't healed. At that time, I don't know that we could have called it triggers.
Right.
But now
No, we
looking
didn't have
back,
language for
no,
it.
we didn't have language. Now realizing, oh, I was triggered at that point, or oh, that made it harder. And when you live together, that distance you were talking about doesn't exist.
Right. You
Right.
can't
So
escape.
now you can't escape.
Yes.
Now your best self is not coming forward most of the time
Yeah.
because you can't escape.
You can't just have a 15-minute phone call where you are really loving
Right.
and kind and you
Right.
muster it up and then you can hang up the phone
Right.
and have
Right.
space. You're in each other's space.
Right.
So it was hard on both of us. It was not a great time, I think, for either one of us. I'm thankful for you guys sheltering us, letting us have a place to land. When we moved back to Colorado, we had no money. It was so expensive here
Yes.
compared to where we were living outside of Chicago. And, you know, I'm thankful for that season, but I think it definitely started us off on a rough start, you know? And then I went through deep trauma on a personal level of just a lot of catastrophic things that happened. And I think that this pain kind of took a back burner. And while that happened, of course, you know, I have a special needs daughter. All this stuff is happening. All of our pain's getting triggered. And my marriage is starting to fall apart.
Mm.
I mean, it was continuing to fall apart. I would say the seeds of falling apart were happening long before that.
Right.
And I think for me, you know, you just hit these moments in life where there is just pain everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a very painful season for me to look back on. But in the midst of that season, and this is why, like, you know, all the courses that Justin and Abby do that we do, like, are things that we've actually walked out, have come out of really hard seasons in our life. It was out of that season that I realized if something didn't change, that I would lose everything. I would lose my marriage. My family would fall apart. My family, extended family, could fall apart relationally because I hadn't really healed much. But it was out of that season that I called Abby and I did a really deep dive into myself. I did a deep dive into some neuroscience. I learned about triggers.
Yeah.
And started really understanding what was happening in my brain with pain and emotions and in my body in conflict, and really, really got, tightened the reins down on myself. And so I ended up right before this season feeling like, I feel like I'm supposed to speak and in our church, which was a huge vulnerable thing for me because for so long, church with you guys was painful for me. Not even because of you guys necessarily, but just when you are a pastor's kid, you watch your parents go through so much pain that it's not necessarily the funnest place to be in the world. It's not necessarily the place that brings you a lot of joy, you know? It does in some ways, and I feel at home in the church, and I feel pain being in church, but I felt this vulnerable thing to just, and it wasn't even about speaking, because I'm like, I don't even care. It's not even about speaking. I came to you guys and said, I want to speak. Will you back me up? Will you support me? Like, will you get behind me? Will you let me do this? And it was a way of me saying, like, will you guys, like, believe in me?
Right.
Like, will you love me? Will you believe in me? Will you get behind me? And it wasn't even for anybody else other than me.
Yeah.
And you guys, and this step of faith, and you guys responded so well. And we're like, we will. And it's funny because I always have these things with, like, people promoting their kids in church when their kids, like, just because they're their kids.
Yeah.
Dad has that same thing.
That's
which
bad for me.
has caused a lot of damage in our relationship because he would go over and beyond to make sure we did not get promoted in church, though we stayed humble in our places. Which is why it was a big deal for me to ask you guys that, but it was incredibly healing for my heart.
Yeah.
Because you guys just responded with like, yeah, we're going to get behind you. We believe in you. Like, we're going to help you. We're going to champion you in this. And it was, honestly, it was so hard for me. People don't know that about me. It's actually hard for me to do these things. It's hard for me to speak. It was hard for me to ask you guys to do that. But it healed my heart so much feeling like you guys believed in me. Especially you, Dad, because I had pain around like feeling like I wasn't good enough.
Right.
In the area of church or singing or speaking and just the fact that like, you immediately got behind me. I was like, okay, that's all my heart needed. I just needed to know. And the question burning deep down inside is like, do you believe in me?
Right.
Well,
do you believe in me?
And what's so beautiful is really the fact that you decided to be vulnerable. Like you had learned as a teenager to disconnect, not need anything from your parents, act like it didn't affect you if they believed in you or not. So for you to like, there's parts of us in our childhood that we kind of lose. Like, oh, you actually needed to be believed in your childhood. You just disconnected from that. And so for you to be able to connect to that part of your heart and then allow that to come back and then allow their love to heal that spot is so powerful. We're right at the part of the story where Pietze then she actually teaches about triggers, and we're about to go into how
it all turns from here.
And so we're going to talk about that in next week's episode, how it turned and what they learned that gave them common language, that they gave them a pathway through conflict, that gave them an ability to revisit the past and find healing, not just revisit the past and stab each other with it. It is a beautiful, beautiful story. And so we'll continue this conversation then. If you guys are listening, we are running the Pathway to Freedom, and it has honestly changed Pietze's entire life, my entire life. It has changed the way we do relationships, the way we do conflict, the way we do our business. Every consultant that I train, we have go through the pathway and do the homework from that course for a year straight. It is life-changing and so foundational. And one of the things I love is it really teaches you that you guys were talking about. It teaches you to have compassion on why you've done what you've done in the past.
Yeah.
We just listened to a call where people were telling us how it impacted them. And one of the people was like, actually lots of the people said, it helped me realize I was lovable. Like I never thought of the Pathway to Freedom as a course that is unto compassion. But then I was like, that's actually the whole point, is learning to see your humanity, to understand why you've done the things you've done, that you've been mad at yourself for years, to understand what's going on in your brain and in your body and in your heart so that you can actually love that part of you that you've decided was unlovable for years. So you can actually get truth and healing to that so that it can transform your life and you can get out of the things that you do that you don't want to do. So signups are happening now. JustinandAbby.com. That's JustinandAbby.com. The Pathway to Freedom. We're starting in August. So you want to sign up as soon as possible. Thank you guys. I know this is an abrupt, we're crash landing.
We're all like still tears in our eyes.
Yes. It's so
Just
beautiful.
end
You guys are
this sucker
so
right up.
mushy. I was going to give you guys a pee break before we record the next one, but you probably cried out all of the water in your bodies. So
No, I have to go to the bathroom.
It's still there. It's still there. She's been drinking her jug of water over here.
Thank you guys for being so vulnerable and tender and wide open. I know this is going to impact so many people who've never heard their parents have this much empathy and compassion. I feel affected by it just getting to witness it. And I have witnessed it so much in my life. So thank you guys so much, and stay tuned.